Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the thriller crime films from 2024, titled Maharaja. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens with two barbers sitting idly inside a salon, and singing songs to pass their time. But the third barber, named Maharaja, has a very worried look on his face for some reason. He is a hard-working, down-to-earth man whose entire life revolves around his wife and their baby daughter. The scene then shifts to the following day, as Maharaja buys some stuffed toys from a local shop. His wife and infant daughter, Jyoti, are inside a house right across the street from the toy store. Unfortunately, just as Maharaja is paying for the purchase, his entire life turns upside down. A speeding truck suddenly loses control and slams into the house while his family is still inside. The barber is devastated to see this. The scene then shifts to 15 years later, in the present day, where an older Jyoti lives a peaceful life with her father, who now owns his own salon. There is also a third member in their house, an iron dustbin. It is revealed that on the day of the accident, this seemingly mundane object fell and covered Jyoti, saving her from getting crushed. The father-daughter duo have named it Lakshmi, and treat it like a human being. They even keep it with utmost respect and worship it regularly. On the other hand, Jyoti is now a teenager who studies in grade 10. She is more into sports than her education, and the poor girl often gets punished at school for being mediocre in studies. However, her PE teacher, Ms. Asifa, always has her back. One afternoon, the school principal urgently calls Maharaja to his office. It turns out Jyoti has been accused of mixing alcohol in the drinks during the school's annual function. Several students claim to have seen her doing so. The principal, who is a rich, arrogant man, bitterly scolds Jyoti in front of her father. At this moment, Ms. Asifa steps in and shows the principal the video footage of the incident. Turns out, it was a boy from a senior class who was behind the scandal. The principal slaps this other student, but also continues to scold Jyoti for no reason. Maharaja, who has lovingly raised his daughter, can't stand this, and asks the principal to apologize immediately. The latter initially refuses to do so, and even calls the guards to throw Maharaja out. However, not even a dozen men are enough to make the aggrieved father budge from the office. This makes the principal realize that Maharaja won't leave without an apology, so he reluctantly asks Jyoti for forgiveness. Later that month, Jyoti is selected for sports camp, and thus she has to leave town for a week. She reminds her father to take good care of himself, and regularly wash Lakshmi. She leaves along with Ms. Asifa and her other friends, and Maharaja becomes extremely lonely in the absence of his daughter. A week later, Maharaja closes his salon at 10, and returns home rather late than usual. The scene then suddenly jumps to a few moments in the future. A venomous snake enters from an open window, and as it slithers across the living room, a scene of chaos unfolds. The whole house seems to be trashed, while Maharaja is lying unconscious on the floor. He only comes back to his senses when the snake accidentally drops a glass bottle near his head. Elsewhere, in the same town, a wealthy businessman named Kalyan storms into a local garage. He had left his car to be serviced a few days ago, and had accidentally forgotten a pair of expensive sunglasses on the dashboard, but when he received his car back, the sunglasses were missing. The garage's manager denies taking it, and this enrages Kalyan so much that he starts beating him up mercilessly, and even threatens to burn the entire garage. Just then, a mechanic named Donna arrives at the spot, and the manager remembers that it was him who had delivered the businessman's car, and asks about the glasses. But before Donna can say anything, Kalyan starts beating him too. He throws the poor mechanic to the floor, and demands that his glasses be returned by tomorrow before storming out. The scene then cuts to the evening, where we see Kalyan with his friends at a local bar. He is recalling the earlier incident when he suddenly sees Donna. The mechanic has Kalyan's expensive sunglasses in his hand, but surprisingly, he smashes it in front of everyone, so an incensed Kalyan charges towards him, but this time, Donna fights back. He brutally beats up the businessmen, and anyone who dares to come in between. Following this, we are taken back to Maharaja, who is now at a police station, looking beaten and injured. He gingerly walks to the sub-inspector Perumal, and demands to register a report. The officer asks him what complaint he wants to file, so Maharaja then begins to recall the events of last night. After closing his shop at around 10 p.m., he returned home. He went straight to the bedroom to change his clothes. This is when two masked men suddenly jumped him from behind, and began beating him up. Maharaja adds that a third man, who must have been hiding in the living room, then knocked him out with a steel rod. After he was unconscious, the goons stole his Lakshmi, and ran away. The sub-inspector is genuinely concerned by this story, until Maharaja reveals a photo and tells the officer that Lakshmi is in the middle, it's a dustbin. This makes him so angry that he tells Maharaja to get out of the station immediately. However, the injured man insists that he won't leave until he gets his Lakshmi back. The sub-inspector then loses his cool, and orders his juniors to throw Maharaja out of the station, deeming him insane. But just like the previous time, even a dozen men aren't able to pull him out, and they end up making a mess of the room. After a while, an extremely shady and corrupt inspector named Varadarajan arrives at the station and sees the commotion. He orders everyone to return to their duties and takes Maharaja to his office. There, the inspector asks him to share his complaint, totally unaware of the bizarre story that is about to follow. Varadarajan listens carefully, until Maharaja tells him about the thing that was stolen, Lakshmi, the damn dustbin. The inspector asks if there was anything precious inside it, but Maharaja says it was empty. The only lead he has is that one of the thugs had a strange lump on his back. Upon hearing this, the confused inspector gives him 500 rupees to buy a new bin. But Maharaja refuses to take the money, and insists on finding the old one. This finally prompts the inspector to lose his patience, and he orders the man to be thrown out of the station. The entire police force somehow manages to chuck him out this time. However, moments later, Maharaja returns with 40,000 rupees. He also promises to give the inspector a whooping 500,000 if they find his Lakshmi. Although Varadarajan reacts angrily and slaps the barber as he cannot take a bribe in public, he later accepts it. Following this, the inspector and his team visit Maharaja's house to investigate the scene of the crime. The house is very modest and doesn't seem to have anything worth stealing. The cops slowly begin to suspect that Lakshmi is no ordinary dustbin. It must have something valuable inside it, which is why Maharaja is so keen to find it. The scene then jumps to a thief named Selvam, who along with his partner, Sabri, is currently robbing a home. These thugs regularly break into houses at night, rob money and jewelry before running away. Unfortunately, the owner of this house, a woman, and her daughter have seen Selvam's face. This means that he will have to end their lives, or else they will report his identity to the police. But before killing them, Selvam mercilessly allows his partner to physically assault the owner's daughter. Based on their calm demeanor, it is obvious that this is not the first time that they have committed a murder or physical assault. Once Sabri is done, the duo lock the mother and daughter in the kitchen and switch on the gas stove. The whole place is then destroyed in an explosion. Even worse, Selvam leads a dual life, as he transforms from a monster at night to a hard-working family man in the day. He has a loving wife, Kokila, and a young daughter, Amu, who has a deep wound scar on her upper back. In fact, he often brings small antique showpieces from the houses he loots, and gives them to his daughter. But if Amu doesn't like these antiques, he throws them, and this is when we see a dustbin that looks exactly similar to Maharaja's Lakshmi. Elsewhere, Inspector Varadarajan has come up with a plan to con the poor Maharaja. He orders his men, including a local police informer named Nalasivam, to scour the entire market and find a dustbin that looks exactly like Lakshmi. On the other hand, he also tells Sub-Inspector Perumal to take out Maharaja's call history, and dig out his entire family background. They suspect Maharaja is hiding something and want to get to the bottom of it. In the meantime, the garage manager shows up at the police station to file a missing person report for Donna. It turns out the mechanic has been AWOL since the last 3 days, and had taken a substantial loan. Maharaja, who is also present in the station, accidentally sees Donna's photo and becomes incredibly nervous for some reason. In a flashback from 3 days ago, Maharaja regains consciousness in his ransacked living room. His eyes immediately fall on a piece of paper that was dropped in the room. It is a car repair bill from a local garage which contains the license plate number and address of the owner. This piece of paper leads Maharaja to a bar where Kalyan is having drinks with his friends. Maharaja talks to him and learns that a local mechanic had taken his car for a joyride, before eventually returning it. Our hero tries to find out more about this mechanic, but Kalyan tells him to mind his own business. Disappointed, Maharaja proceeds to return home when suddenly, Donna arrives at the entrance. Turns out this is the same scene from earlier where Kalyan and his associates are handed a solid-ass whooping. Maharaja, who watches the scene unfold, immediately realizes that this new dude must be the shady mechanic. This means that Donna was the thief who accidentally dropped the bill back in his living room. Hence, after the incident, Maharaja begins tailing him in his motorcycle. Donna soon catches wind of the pursuer, so he lures him into an abandoned warehouse. However, several goons are already waiting, and they start beating the poor barber up. Donna even gloats about breaking into his house, which confirms Maharaja's suspicions. Hearing this, the barber's anger is so intense, that one of the men is struggling to remove his hand from the spanner. And then, when his hand is about to be cut, he suddenly gets a new burst of strength, and quickly fights all the thugs using his classic razor. In the end, he presses Donna against a sharp structure, causing his body to become stuck. Maharaja then demands the identity of the other two thieves who broke into his house. Donna tries to buy some time by revealing that one of them works in the local police station. Just then, he manages to free himself and stab Maharaja in the thigh. But it's not that easy for him. When he attempts to sneak away, the angry barber ends up decapitating him. The scene shifts back to the present where Maharaja is sitting down in the police station. It is now obvious that he came here to search for the cop involved in the theft. Since the perpetrator had a lump on his back, he keeps on touching random cops to find the right one. Elsewhere, Sub-Inspector Perumal and his subordinate reach the abandoned warehouse, and find something shocking. On the other hand, Selvam is gearing up to celebrate his daughter's birthday in a grand manner. He plans to gift her an expensive gold chain encrusted with red rubies. On the way back from the jewelry shop, he visits Maharaja's salon to have a quick shave. The two men have never met before, but do recognize each other as they live a few blocks apart. Suddenly, the trimmer's battery runs out, and Maharaja goes to the shop next door to get new ones. During this time, Selvam receives a call from his accomplice, informing him that their crimes have been exposed in the newspaper. But a cool-headed Selvam tells his partner not to worry about it, as the report doesn't mention their identity. And then, just as he turns back, he sees Maharaja right behind him. Selvam fears that the barber might have overheard the conversation, but doesn't say anything, and quickly leaves the salon after he's done. Moments later, Maharaja notices that Selvam has left his gold chain behind and goes to return it to his house. But coincidentally, Maharaja reaches there, just as the police arrive and walk behind him to question Selvam regarding the lootings and murders. As the situation gets tense, Kokila believes it is a misunderstanding and asks her husband to speak up. But when he remains silent, she realizes that he is not the man she thought he is. The other thug, Sabri, is also present there and he decides to take matters into his own hands. He points a gun at the cops, but is immediately shot and killed. As for Selvam, he is arrested in front of his family and the entire community. A devastated Kokila disowns him right away, and promises to never let their daughter see him. As a result, Selvam mistakenly believes that the barber is responsible for all this, so he guns for revenge. On the other hand, the police are working hard to create the fake Dustbin Lakshmi, until it is finally ready. The police also decide to frame someone for the theft to make the arrest look real. Informer Nalasivam agrees to pose as the thief, in return for 50,000 cash. The police then ask Maharaja to narrate the incident again over the phone, so that Nalasivam can act accordingly. On the other side of the phone, Maharaja recounts the incident, but a flashback from some days ago depicts the actual events. In a shocking turn of events, it is revealed that the incident happened not to him, but to his daughter, Jyoti. She had just returned home from the regional sports camp, while Maharaja was still at work. The identity of the perpetrators is also not short of mind-boggling. The three of them are Nalasivam, who was accompanied by the car mechanic, Donna, and none other than Selvam. It is revealed that this guy just got out of prison after 14 long years, meaning the events we saw about him earlier were all flashbacks. Selvam still believes that the barber ratted him out to the cops, so he wants to take revenge. But when the goons don't find him, their wrath turns towards Jyoti. They beat the poor girl up, and Selvam mercilessly allows Nalasivam to physically abuse her multiple times. The thugs then wait for a bit longer, but when Maharaja doesn't arrive, they simply leave. When the flashback ends, Nalasivam, who has been listening to Maharaja's account through the phone, is left speechless. He suddenly realizes that his past acts have come back to bite him. Nalasivam is afraid that his secret might come out, but Inspector Varadarajan, who had no idea what he had done, forces him to pose as the Dustbin's thief. The scene once again flashes back to the unfortunate night. Maharaja returns home at around 10:30 p.m., after buying a new pair of running shoes for her daughter. Sadly, his happiness soon turns into horror when he sees Jyoti covered in bruises, on the verge of death. Maharaja immediately rushes her to the hospital. Deeply distressed, he begins trashing his home, and also accidentally hits a glass bottle behind his head, knocking himself out in the process. The truth is, the three goons who had abused Jyoti never took Lakshmi, the dustbin. Maharaja had actually fabricated the theft story, so that he could find and punish the three culprits. Back in the present day, Inspector Varadarajan and his men take Nalasivam to Maharaja's home to return the dustbin. But in a shocking twist, he reveals that his team had already discovered Nalasivam's involvement in the physical abuse of the poor girl, while investigating Donna's death. They simply wanted to bring him to Maharaja for vigilante justice. A lump on Nalasivam's back is also discovered, meaning he is the real culprit, as indicated by Jyoti. Following this, the officers, unable to control their rage, leave the pedophile alone in the room with Maharaja, and lock the door from outside. After getting permission from the inspector to do whatever he wants, a vengeful Maharaja beats the shit out of the criminal. He then hacks the culprit to death in the most sadistic of manners, but not before finding out who the third accomplice is. In the next scene, Maharaja arrives at a construction site where Selvam works. They get into an intense fight, but it is our hero who soon gains the upper hand. He beats the man who has caused his daughter so much pain. Up next, he ultimately breaks his legs by crushing them with a block of marble. Soon afterwards, Jyoti, who can now walk again, arrives at the spot with Ms. Asifa. It turns out she wants to face the man who attacked her. She tosses a bag of jewelry at him, assuming he had broken into their home for it. Selvam, however, finds the gold chain that he had bought for Amu on her birthday. This is the same chain that Maharaja had come to return 14 years earlier. Following this, the movie circles back to when Selvam had just been arrested. It is revealed that Maharaja and his family had come to Kokila's new house to return the gold chain. But the woman refused to claim the ornament as she considered it blood money. Maharaja respected her decision, and went across the street to buy a toy for Amu. Turns out this is the first scene where a truck rammed into the house and caused heavy devastation. But in a shocking twist, it is revealed that 3 people died that day. Maharaja's wife, his child, and Kokila. The only one who survived was Amu, as the dustbin Lakshmi fell on top of her. Stricken by the death of his family, our hero then adopted Amu, and changed her name to Jyoti. In the present, Jyoti turns to leave from the construction site when Selvam suddenly sees a scar on her shoulder. This is the same scar that she got when she was a child. When it finally dawns on Selvam that the girl is his daughter, he bursts into tears. After all, he physically beat her, and let his accomplice abuse her in the most inhumane way possible. The movie comes to an end as Amu leaves with Maharaja, and her teacher Asifa. As for Selvam, he becomes so consumed with guilt that he unalives himself by intentionally falling off the building. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.